inside the deadly outbreak as the panic spreads across the ocean. Could a lethal killer hit our shores?
We did the test, and I did have Ebola.
It's a threat to the world.
We're heading into the hot zone with one of the top infectious disease specialists in the world. Dr. Besser takes us on a terrifying journey.
It's the gates of hell.
We don't touch them.
And comes face to face with the disease that shows no mercy.
To protect the U.S. is to stop the outbreak.
This is the only way to keep entire nations from being reduced to ashes.
This deadly virus spreads across borders. Find out how bushmeat from markets in Africa end up smuggled into the United States and can pose a hidden threat here at home. Where did it come from? Why is it spreading? Can anyone stop it? And is there a cure? Ebola inside the deadly outbreak. Somewhere on the other side of the planet, in a hidden corner of a tropical rainforest, a new virus is surely incubating. A pathological killer that could unleash a deadly plague at any time. ABC's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Besser, takes us on a harrowing journey to the heart of darkness.
I'm crawling through the dense jungles of Cameroon with a man we call the virus hunter. He's in a race to stop a virus before it can infect human beings.
What our work is focused on is understanding what's out there that could potentially harm us as a species.
If you think this has nothing to do with you, think again. Inside the bush, animals hold the potential for worldwide danger. These paths are not just local roads, they are a virus's highway.
When you see a logging road, what do you think about?
I think about the potential for both animals as well as humans with new viruses to get to cities where you have planes, cities where you have boats.
So things that happen in Central Africa don't stay in Central Africa.
You got it.
The bridge from animal to human? It's believed that fruit bats are the main reservoir of Ebola, carriers who don't get ill, but spread the disease to other wild animals. And then to humans, through bushmeat. Raw meat from apes, monkeys, and others killed for food, and who may carry the virus with them. But this meat doesn't always stay in the bush. Poachers sell it on the black market, and it's smuggled around the world, sold to immigrants longing for a taste of home. A few years ago, ABC News correspondent Dan Harris found what seemed to be black market bushmeat in this New York supermarket.
How much you sell that one?
It's a pound, $20 a pound.
$20 a pound, that's too much, man. Yeah, man.
I mean, so this seems to indicate that this stuff is not hard to get.
We know that it's readily available not just in Queens, but also in parts of Washington, D.C., parts of Minneapolis, St. Paul, other centers around the country. And it's because people have a passion for bushmeat. They want that taste from home.
This African immigrant, a mother of 10 named Mani Mane, was sentenced to 3 years probation for importing crates of monkey meat, which she has said her community consumes to celebrate religious holidays. Are you guys selling bushmeat out of here?
No.
No?
No, bushmeat, no. Fish, dry fish, snails, bushmeat.
We had an investigator with a hidden camera come in here, and he found what he said was cane rat from Africa.
No.
So nothing whatsoever.
Bushmeat.
Okay. And you're the owner, you say?
The CDC says they're concerned. Experts say that meat like this could potentially be teeming with Ebola, or worse, undiscovered viruses carrying unknown threats. That's why Dr. Nathan Wolf's research is critical, searching in animals' blood for tiny microbes, diseases that could grow into lethal pathogens. It's not alarmist, it's happening. The deadly swine flu that killed 18,000 worldwide jumped to humans from pigs, HIV from a monkey, and now Ebola.
Ebola is now an epidemic of the likes that we have not seen before. It's spiraling out of control, it is getting worse, it's spreading faster and exponentially.
Where Ebola's hit the hardest?
Okay?
Liberia, the epicenter.
Not a lot of flights coming into Monrovia, and those that are coming in, they're screening everybody for Ebola.
Surreal, uneasy, in the grips of something awful. Monrovia, Liberia is a capital under siege by the deadliest Ebola outbreak in history. Doctors and relief workers suited up like spacemen make their way through the streets in a race to contain the virus that so far they've been unable to stop.
government wants to do is to find out who are those that are sick so we can treat them.
So they basically are checking who can come in and out of West Point. Only people with aid supplies and medical staff can go in and out, and soldiers.
ABC News reporter Carrie L. Doe is Liberian-American, and she's been filing reports from a neighborhood here.
Mister, how many bodies have you picked up today?
11 bodies.
Where thousands are under quarantine, she has watched as fear turned to despair, despair to anger, and then pandemonium. There's been looting and rioting. The only routes out are ones nobody wants to take, by ambulance, straight to an Ebola treatment center, or in a body bag. Liberia is a country founded by freed American slaves. The president, Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, is Harvard educated and lived in New Jersey. And the main hospital is named for our own president, John F. Kennedy.
This is the emergency room, and you can see there's no one going in, there's no one going out. That's because there are no doctors to take care of patients. There's no one here.
No one here until ghost time.
This unit, it's stuck back in the furthest corner of the hospital compound. It used to be used for treating people with cholera, and now it's where they're putting patients who may have Ebola. Many of them do.
The facilities are makeshift. Their protective gear is the only barrier between them and the disease. They've had to make some of it themselves.
They don't have hoods that are ready-made, so they're making hoods out of other protective equipment. The temperature, is it hot in what you're wearing?
Oh yeah, that's the heat.
The heat is too much?
Yeah, too much.
The place is not just like ordinary hospitals. If you are finished with what you want to do, you don't just leave and leave the others there. I'm okay.
He's got a hood, he's got 2 layers of gloves on, an apron, boots, outer clothing, a mask, and goggles, so that every part of his body, every inch of skin is totally covered up. Even though I've spent my career working on infectious diseases, I have to confess, this is scary.
You don't touch anything, okay? You just use your eyes. And you may talk to somebody, but you don't touch anything. Okay. This is Ebola Zaire. Highly contagious, highly infectious, very dangerous. So you have to take very good care. Don't rush to help somebody. Don't pick up things. Don't panic, eh?
Stay calm.
Stay calm.
This is the Ebola isolation unit. He's about to go in. He opens the door. You can take a look. Patients with Ebola are everywhere.
The team is not allowed to go any further, even in all their protective gear. Ebola is named after the river in the Congo, where the virus first appeared in 1976. There have been major outbreaks since then, but never like this. Cases began showing up in March of this year. In June, the first case walks into Monrovia's Elwha clinic.
My job in the Ebola unit was to make sure that doctors were suited up properly.
At the time, Nancy Wrightbowl is a Christian missionary from North Carolina with no formal medical training.
When doctors went in, I wanted to make sure that they were dressed properly, and when they came out, I wanted to make sure that they had been decontaminated properly. And I felt the weight of that, I can tell you.
We've been in Ecuador for 5 years. We were in Zambia for 8 years, and then in Liberia. We've traveled in many places.
But they have no idea what they've signed up for this time. As the death toll mounts, Liberian health workers start to fall ill.
I had a co-worker who ended up having Ebola and died. And I had trained him for 3 nights.
By midsummer, one by one, 8 organizations make the wrenching decision to pull out of Liberia. But the Wrightbowls stay. So do Doctors Kent Brantley and John Fankhauser, physicians and fellow missionaries who work at Nancy's clinic.
Our hospital is a busy, 45 to 50 patients at any one time, 3 to 5 surgeries, delivering, 4 or 5 babies every day, where we'd see, 150 patients a day. So each of us took our turn seeing patients in the clinic as well. So it was very busy, very full, very clinical.
They don't realize they are in the midst of the worst Ebola outbreak in history. The problem? This outbreak has come to such a densely populated place. 2 years ago, there was one in Uganda, across the continent. Back then, Dr. Besser traveled deep into the jungle to rural villages, very far from any city.
Wrapping up this This epidemic is all about going down these roads, finding any possible case. It's really hard work.
He and his producer were the only outsiders permitted to travel with the CDC team into the epicenter, with unprecedented access into the wards of suffering.
Just try and stay calm. It is quite frightening if you suddenly start to find breathing difficult. Don't touch your masks. That's the rules.
Very good.
This time, Besser was allowed to go inside, but it was too dangerous to allow his producer to follow. He went in alone, with only a small camera.
I have to say that there are a few things that I've done in medicine that are as nerve-wracking as going into this place. Those are the 3 who have Ebola.
I'm doused with bleach again and again.
It's hot in there.
This outbreak was ultimately brought under control. Its isolation made it more possible to contain. But Ebola didn't go away. It may have been as early as December that this latest strain came out of the jungles in Guinea, along the open borders of 3 countries. And when it hit Liberia's biggest city, it exploded with a vengeance. Ebola travels through contact with bodily fluids, blood, diarrhea, vomit. And this is what makes this outbreak so dangerous. In an urban area with people packed on top of each other, Ebola has been almost impossible to stop.
This is not just a threat to Liberia, this is not just a threat to West Africa or Africa, it's a threat to the world. If we don't turn it around, for every day it continues to spread, there's more and more risk of spread to other countries in Africa, other countries around the world. There is no way we can seal off and isolate a country, even if we wanted to.
The real fear is that it could mutate into a smarter virus, turning airborne. It could infect with a single sneeze, as millions of lethal pathogens fly through the air. In airports, crowded subways, children's playgrounds. A global pandemic that knows no borders. Coming up, a call to action.
We have to move with force
as the virus turns on the American volunteers, brave enough to stand in its way.
Really pretty sick. So they did the test. I did have Ebola.
We have to act fast. We have to move with force. And
President Obama now sounding the alarm, sending 3,000 U.S. troops and 100 specialists to West Africa, to the front lines of the battle against the deadly Ebola virus.
Faced with this outbreak, the world is looking to us, the United States.
Joining healthcare workers who have come from all corners of the globe in a race against the clock to beat back the pandemic.
Will we see Ebola in America?
I can't predict the future. What I'm sure of, and what's happened already, is that people have come from parts of the world where they might have been exposed and they've had fever. So we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared to test, to isolate, and to respond.
Already, Ebola is in 5 West African countries. The epicenter, Monrovia, Liberia.
At the request of the Liberian government, we're going to establish a military command center in Liberia to support civilian efforts across the region.
Henry Gray is running logistics here for Doctors Without Borders.
So this is a 240 square meter tent.
Building clinics here as fast as they can. This group is on the front lines of every health crisis in the world, but even they are overwhelmed.
How much room do you have now in the 120-bed unit?
The 120-bed unit is full.
It's full.
Full.
And the patients who come here who need care?
Unfortunately, we have quite high mortality amongst the patients, so that frees up space.
Before this outbreak, what's the largest center you've ever designed?
Earlier in this outbreak in West Africa, I think we went up to about 80 beds, but prior to that, around 40 beds.
40 beds?
Yeah.
And here, 10 times that?
10 times.
Is the virus winning?
The world has never seen Ebola as we're seeing it now, and the challenges are enormous.
Ebola is sneaky. The first symptoms look just like flu or malaria. Achy muscles, a headache, fever. The patients have probably delayed coming in, tried to convince themselves they don't have the virus.
Going into the triage unit here at JFK Hospital, that's where they try and sort out whether a patient coming in has Ebola or something else.
They're having diarrhea, stomach pain, vomiting, some are bleeding from the mouth, another person is bleeding from the injection site.
And how will you know if that's Ebola or something else?
Because majority of them have interacted with people who died.
All along the way they're spraying with chlorine so that if there have been any Ebola leakages, they're killing it with the bleach. So what happened?
One of the patients just died from the here just on arrival. I spent here like 20 to 30 minutes.
So by the time they get from triage into the building, some of them have died.
Yeah.
And Ebola can kill you in so many ways. Severe dehydration, your kidney and liver shuts down. You may even bleed to death. The sheer number of cases coming in make it very dangerous for those patients who don't actually have Ebola.
They're sitting near the patients who are sick. Is that a problem?
Well, once they bring somebody who doesn't have an infection in here, then they have exposed that person. But we take so many precautions inside there.
Yeah, but for the patients who come in, if he didn't have Ebola before, he may have it now.
Yeah, the risk is high. We are spraying all the time and we limit movement. We don't have enough space where to put this.
Yeah.
That's why there's
too many patients.
Yeah.
You need more space, more treatment facilities.
We need more beds.
When Dr. Besser came back to the clinic the following day, they had 10 more dead, 30 more. Sick, and they were turning patients away.
How many patients are you seeing? How many? 80. Yesterday they said there were 60. They keep coming. There's 3 patients waiting to be seen, but nowhere for them to go. No beds. It's full.
At the Elwha Clinic, Dr. John Fankhauser is relieved that reinforcements are arriving. For most of the summer, he and his colleague Dr. Kent Brantley were among the few American doctors who stayed.
Kent Brantley, he's a family physician, much like me. Kent was drawn to the Ebola work, and when Samaritan's Purse offered to run the newer Ebola unit, they named Kent as the medical director.
By midsummer, his fellow evangelical missionary Nancy Wrightball had gone from hospital administrator to decontaminator.
When Ebola hit, Nancy stepped into the position of not only our head hygienist, but also training the other hygienists that were coming alongside. And so she had a position that was never inside the unit. When we got suited up, she would make sure that we were suited up appropriately and not an inch of skin was showing. And then when we came out of the unit, Nancy was in charge of spraying us down and decontaminating us.
Those are critical jobs.
Exactly. Very critical.
She understood the risks, but even that didn't protect her. One hot day in July, Nancy Wrightball started to feel ill.
I first knew Nancy was sick on her birthday.
I was running fever. I had had malaria once in this past year, and it was just the same symptoms.
Dr. Brantley was also sick, and so Dr. Fankhauser took on a job he never thought he'd have, caring for his friends.
Kent became ill the day after Nancy became ill, and I found out about it after he had spent the day at home, and he had fever for about 12 or 14 hours solid, and I was concerned. The next morning, Ken contacted me and was actually doing worse.
By Saturday, I was still not doing very well, and the doctors came back and said, Nancy, we don't really think you have Ebola, but we want to do the test anyway just to set everybody's mind at ease.
It seemed almost impossible with how cautious both of them were. We were really trying to convince ourselves that this was some other form of illness, maybe dengue fever or some other type of illness that would be mosquito-borne or could have infected him and caused similar symptoms.
And still ahead, an experience that becomes all too real for American caregivers working here.
It is a fire straight from the pit of hell.
They weren't sure I would even make it to the U.S.
And then, is there a cure? Ebola inside the deadly outbreak. Here in Liberia, in the grips of the deadly Ebola epidemic, even the heroes are scared. Doctors and medical volunteers are vulnerable. In some outbreaks, they account for 1/4 of all Ebola deaths.
Closed off our program in April of this year.
It just wasn't safe.
We didn't think that we had the necessary precautions to do it safely.
American doctor James Sirleaf is the son of Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. He left his practice in Georgia to help with the crisis, only to find panic and chaos.
The NGO community has mostly left.
Yeah.
We had to pull our physicians. We can't risk. These people are not Ebola trained doctors. It's just not safe to have them here.
While others pulled out, Many of those who stayed were missionaries. And by early August, Americans Dr. Kent Brantley and Nancy Wrightball had serious symptoms.
How do you tell the love of your life that they've contracted a deadly disease and that there's, a chance, a great chance that she might not survive?
It fell to Nancy's husband David to deliver the diagnosis.
He said, I want to tell you that Kent, Dr. Brantley, his Ebola test has come back and it's positive. It was hard to hear that. And then David said, and Nancy, you have Ebola also.
The odds are not good. Among Liberians, more than half of those with the disease are dying. There is one slim hope. A new drug called ZMapp still being tested on monkeys. Dr. Brantley is the first human patient. Their charities hire a plane to transport them home over 4,000 miles in a specialized medical isolation pod, sealed to protect everyone on board.
When I got on the flight in Liberia, I wondered if I would ever see David again. We felt like it was pretty critical. I don't remember much of the flight at all. Pretty dehydrated, really pretty sick. They weren't sure I would even make it to the U.S.
They are taken to Emory University in Atlanta, a different medical universe. One of 4 high-tech centers in the country designed to handle the most deadly and contagious diseases.
People who say that you should not have been allowed back in the country, it's just too dangerous. What do you say to that?
I would say that in coming back into the country, we understand the concern for public health. Having said that, there have been established procedures and protocols that we took very great care in observing.
Most important, Nancy is isolated from everyone, even her own husband.
It's a really lonely place to be.
We put our hands on the glass and I told her again, she's the most beautiful woman I know.
It's her family and faith that got her through.
I think one of the scripture, it's a psalm that so many people know, that the Lord is my shepherd. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil.
Some Americans say that you had no business being over there. It's too risky.
We went to serve, but when you go to serve, you count the cost, but you lay it down. You lay down those fears, you lay down what you think might happen.
Then, finally, the news that both the Wrightballs and Kent Brantley have been praying for. They are virus-free.
Today is a miraculous day. I am thrilled to be alive, to be well, and to be reunited with my family.
But still ahead, what awaits American troops as they head for the hot zone? Panic in the streets. And can they help Ebola's youngest victims? It looks like a war zone. The West Point slum in Monrovia, Liberia. Population over 50,000. By now, the Ebola virus, on the move since December, has killed over 2,000 people in West Africa. And now 3,000 American troops are preparing to deploy there.
This is an epidemic that is not just a threat to regional security, it's a potential threat to global security. If these countries break down, if their economies break down, if people panic.
It's already happened. In Monrovia, Liberia, the epicenter of the crisis, West Point became a flashpoint. The panic started in mid-August when the government set up an Ebola holding center there. They quickly filled up with people like Finda. The other adults in her family are dead, so she has 6 kids with her, and her nephew Sa is sick.
Why are you laying down?
Her young sister, another nephew, and her own 2 boys aren't ill, but they all wait with Sa, amid other patients who may have Ebola.
You an hour?
I will not touch him.
Touch him. Why?
Because it's safe. It's safe. And then what I'm doing in my hand.
Her stay here is short-lived. Residents are furious that patients with Ebola are in the neighborhood, so they ransack the center, looting infected medical supplies. 2 days later, the government puts the entire community under quarantine. But the rioting and looting continue. Containing a frightened populace isn't easy. In West Point, the quarantine is doomed from the beginning.
There where the stream of crosses, that's where people cannot go past.
That's the quarantine line.
Yes.
And the idea is that the germs will stay on that side of the line.
I guess so. Yeah.
That's just absurd. But when people are scared, they do crazy things. I've never seen a quarantine area like this. They haven't used quarantines like this where you shut off whole parts of cities since the Dark Ages. Behind the barriers, there's people who can't come and go. They've been in this compound for 7 days? 8 days. Why? It's like you're in prison.
In prison. Someone problem, but they have kept us here, keeping us hostage.
For some, no food, little water, and no power.
It's very bad. It's very bad. So you can't live in a dark place just like you're an animal.
Meanwhile, Finda and her children are living on the streets, afraid her house is infected with Ebola. 3 more of her kids are now sick, and they're hungry. But she's also afraid to go to the hospital. So many have died there.
They were taken to the hospital today?
I don't know.
We will take you from here. How many children?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Like it or not, like so many others, she is forced to go. But it's too late. Little Sa dies in the hospital. But these photos have surfaced. Even in death, he is known as the little boy on the bucket. When Finda sees those pictures, she breaks down.
I think he said, "Can me get better in my head?" Because I get play for my children. Ali, the other baby people that die in my head. They might children they get so far. They need my hair. Come me be happy. They say I get this out. Anything I will go up. Now go out say that one I will not get it. Now go out give me the one. I say voting for him. I say play for him for giving chance, and they want to have the one live.
Coming up.
He said we can come.
A secret ritual, a hidden danger. Is there any way to stop this virus? The answer may surprise you. Ebola inside the deadly outbreak.
I never thought I'd be in pursuit of death.
We're chasing one of the burial teams that's been put in place to properly dispose of people who die from Ebola.
But in Monrovia, Liberia, Ebola is spreading uncontrollably.
One of the main ways Ebola is spreading in West Africa is through burial practices, the ritual cleaning, the other things that are done around burial. If they can't change that, the feeling is there's no way to control Ebola in West Africa.
Officials are on the hunt to find these bodies, test, and burn them before more people get sick. At JFK Hospital, the dead are taken out through the back door.
We can come to this side. Yes? We're beckoned in by part of the burial team. He said we can come. Don't touch anything. Don't touch anything. How many bodies are there?
9.
9?
9.
They've already collected 9 people who've died from Ebola. How many more will there be today? 5 more. 5 more to be collected. Oh my God. It's the first time here in Liberia that I've really been scared. This is incredible. You know, seeing a truck cart away 10 bodies of people who died from Ebola, it's the gates of hell, going into that treatment ward and knowing that the odds are you're going to come out in a body bag.
The scenes here in Liberia are grim reminders of what can happen when a virus breaks into the human population. We are all social creatures, care for our sick, wash and bury our dead. And that is in the end what makes human beings so vulnerable to Ebola. It's why one of the biggest problems here in Monrovia are burials. Bodies may be covered with viral particles that can infect any who touch them. Funerals are a common source of Ebola's spread. ABC News producer Carrie Eldo was with a burial team as they attempted to recover a body from a grieving family who doesn't want to part with it.
Why do you want to bury the body today?
Because the man is a Muslim man. So we won't bury the body today. Won't do our bury, won't bury the man today. People say that people can go out to bury the body in our place. It's not anything. But won't bury the man today.
But what if he does have it? What if he did have Ebola?
The man not have Ebola.
The bodies are packed up, never to be seen again. This is where they end up, a pile of ashes, beside the next bodies ready to be burned. Sometimes the bodies are taken before they're even tested. It leads to mass denial that loved ones ever had the disease. Families so desperate to bury their own that we catch a secret one about to take place to avoid the government carting the body away.
Where were you all taking the body?
The boys were caught by vigilant neighbors, disgusted that they might spread the disease in the neighborhood. An unforgivable crime.
That thing is very, very terrible. For you sitting in a car with that body, it's terrible. They brought all the Ebola outside. They put in the community straight away, y'all.
Precisely what these body collectors are trying to avoid.
We're following this blue truck. It's got the head of the burial team. He got word that in one house in this village, 5 people died from Ebola.
It's a race against time. Every second those bodies linger, the greater the chance of someone else getting infected.
The community here says that the 2 people in this house did not die from Ebola, so they're not letting the burial team in. To Elwa. How many bodies are in Elwa? Elwa, 8 there. Yes. The burial team is pulling out. They're going to the next hospital where there are many bodies, many people who have died from Ebola.
A grim task with no end in sight, no shortage of bodies. When we come back, can the virus come to our shores?
It is a fire. It is a fire straight from the pit of hell. We cannot fool ourselves into thinking that the vast moat of the Atlantic Ocean will protect us from the flames of this fire.
An impassioned warning from a man who knows Ebola's wrath all too well. American doctor Kent Brantley knows he's lucky. The medicine he took is not a definitive cure for Ebola. Others who were treated with it have died. And as the U.S. puts boots on the ground in West Africa, cases there double every 3 weeks.
An already very weak public health system is near collapse in these countries. Patients are being turned away, and people are literally dying in the streets.
And it's a struggle to keep infected patients quarantined. This video captures hospital workers trying to subdue a man who ran away from the Ebola ward. Even one case undetected can wreak havoc. A few weeks ago, a Nigerian diplomat with Ebola slipped out of his quarantine and fled to the global oil hub of Port Harcourt, where hundreds of workers from all over the world live. He was secretly treated by a local doctor in a hotel room. That doctor died of Ebola, but not before treating dozens of patients that could have infected others. Now, more than 200 people are being monitored for the virus, leaving all of Nigeria at risk.
This matters big, not just for Americans, for everyone in the world. This is an unprecedented health threat, and if we don't stop it here, we're going to be dealing with it for years around the world.
As the world focuses on containing Ebola, there is hope that it can finally be stopped. Scientists are right now racing to develop a cure. The NIH is testing a new vaccine, while Japanese researchers say they've developed a method to detect Ebola in just 30 minutes. And the latest breakthrough: doctors in Nebraska have injected Dr. Rick Sacra with antibodies from his colleague Kent Brantley's blood, and he seems to be responding.
The best way to protect the U.S. is to stop the outbreak in West Africa.
What can be done to save the lives of people who already have Ebola?
We give them the best. There are some who are doing well, like I can call you. Roma! There are some who overcome it, like this guy. How are you, my dear?
Hello.
Come here. But
How are you?
Cross the water here.
Yeah. How are you doing?
You have been here for how long?
How many days?
1 week, 1 day today.
1 week, 1 day?
Yes.
And how do you feel today?
I'm okay. Jumping.
And when will you go home?
I want to go home today.
Today?
Yes.
What do they say? When can you go home?
And
When can you go home? When?
Now!
And a joyful homecoming for Liberian Dr. Philip Ireland, who contracted Ebola after bravely treating so many in his native country.
You've survived Ebola?
Yep. Yep. I've been through hell. Okay, I've seen death, and I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and just to see the sun and to see the trees and to see my children, my wife, and just to be with them. Right now, I'm very grateful. I'm happy just to be alive.
His words echoing a fellow survivor, American Nancy Reichball. But already, a strain of Ebola has emerged in the Congo. And nobody knows better than those who have put their lives on the line how difficult and dangerous it is to stop this treacherous virus.